So let me start by extending our heartfelt gratitude to Mr. Andrew Titoy for making time to be with us today, as this the first of the CEO Roundtables. By way of giving an introduction to the CEO Roundtables, we're looking to facilitate critical conversations with leaders of business so that we can share lessons from successes and failures and find out where the journey should lead, because I'm certain that in many instances we have wanted to go somewhere, but we may not always have gotten to the destination according to the path we thought we would chart. We also want to discuss trends on transformation, but we're also cognizant of the fact that transformation is not enough if all we're transforming is the businesses we work in. We want to see the lives of the extraordinary person being changed. We want to see ourselves creating jobs, we want to see ourselves fixing our infrastructure, and we want to see ourselves creating financial products that match the needs of the people who are in our community. And it is through these platforms and these conversations that we hope to glean learnings and lessons and insights into how we are actively working together to transform the financial services sector. Without much further ado, please allow me at this point in time to invite Ms. Pelisa Ngonyama to come and introduce 91. For the avoidance of doubt, she's my older sister.
I don't normally do written speeches, but this time I decided, because Hendrik flew all the way from London, there must be something written down. Am I loud enough? My name is Pelisa Ngonyama. I am a representative and a proud ambassador of 91. I joined the company 9 years ago. I cannot not mention my partner in crime, Natalie Phillips. Sitting over there, we've got representation from 91 and that table over there. I decided to read and not rely on my own understanding of who Hendrik Titoy is. When he was 29 years old, high energy, he was recruited by Bernard Cantor, spent the whole year trying to recruit this guy, and this guy was saying no at 29. Eventually, he decides to agree to the offer, but he says, I've got two conditions. I'll only do this job if I'll do it in Cape Town, number one. Number two, if I'll run it independently from the bank. So they agreed. I guess they didn't have a choice. What he understood from day one was that if I'm going to disrupt the industry, which was then led by the large insurance companies, he decided to be where they were, which is Cape Town. So if I wanna fight with the big boys, I have to be where they are. So he started in Cape Town, so those were two conditions. And then he says, okay, I'm going to be intentional about disrupting the market. And I'm going to focus on one thing, which is investments. And I'm gonna do that right. And I'm going to make sure that when I employ people, I employ those ambitious individuals that collectively will help me get to where I want to go. He was also clear that I am not building this business for South Africa. I'm based here in South Africa, but I want to build a global business. That he knew from day one. That was intentional. 1991, 1992, first client. I'm going to start with the normal stuff. 1996 opens an office in Gaborone. 1998, he decides to go global. He's a small fish from South Africa. He understands that. But he says, no, I want to use the advantage of coming from an emerging market to take myself globally. How do I do that? Let me go and listen to them. Let me go and learn from the big boys. Let me go and learn how they do things. Learn from competition. Eat what they eat, breathe what they breathe, and then take it from there. And that's what he did. Developed London and other areas in 1998. 2020, or 2018, he decides, I've done it all. I can take myself out of the bank, demerge from the bank. It was easier because it's always been independent from the bank. So demerged in 2018, listed in 2020 in the height of COVID. It was bad. But because he is an ambitious, focused, intentional guy that he is, he decided, okay, I'm going to do it. I've seen businesses come and go, and I always wanted to check what it is that keep businesses going. And I realized that two things, which he confirmed in one of his interviews, that two things that you need to get right. Firstly, if you're running a people's business, you need to run a people's business. Number one. Number two, you create a culture. Your culture is not going to be liked by everyone, but culture it is. So he decided, okay, we've got the financials, the numbers are there, the strategic skills are there, but that's not what I'm looking for to take my business forward. I'm looking at culture, that's number one, and I'm looking at collective ambition. That was the first time I heard of the term. So you must have ambitious people, but collectively, they must take you forward. So he always wondered, when they asked, how did you feel about opening business global? I said, no, I knew from day one that that's what I want to do. And then, so now, 100 million, start, first client in 1992, 2 employees, 2 desks. Fast forward, over 1,000 employees across the globe. Langa, I'm going to mention it. Close to 3 trillion, Langa doesn't like it, assets under management. And another thing that he understands that 91, we are not the only solution, but we're part of the solution in the value chain. That is why he can comfortably go to competition and say, how do you do this? So that he can learn from them. So he understands it, that we are not the only solution, but we are a solution that when taken with combined with other solutions, will take the business forward. Now let's get personal. Who's this guy? He's a wonderful husband. I nearly lost my job the last time I didn't mention this. To Lorette, an awesome father, to Matthijs and Inge. He is the only child. So the whole household was Hendrik's. The house was his, the toys were his. He walks into the room, fills the room, and it is evident today. Hendrik walks into the room. He's not a tall guy, he's not a big guy, but when he walks into the room, he fills the space. And it comes from the fact that he was the only child. He has courage to take risks. I'll give you a story later, personal story, where I thought he took a risk, and when I asked him, this is the risk, and he says, it's calculated, let's do it. He's the most humble leader I've ever met. Hendrik knows all of us by name. When we are going to introduce Hendrik to a client, he wants to see a photo of the client. He wants to practice the name. He wants to pronounce it the right way. I sent him voice notes to say, this is how you say it. Then I gave him a picture of a client. So the client in the picture has glasses. And then he sees him. The client doesn't have glasses. And he says, but in the picture, I said, you can't be talking about pictures. So he's very loyal. He listens to me, and he listens attentively. He's a leader, but when you talk to him, he treats you as an equal. We are equal, we are colleagues. He doesn't have a language that says, I'm the boss, this business is mine, I've started this business. He says, Pelisa, let's talk. And then you know that the level is equal right from the beginning. I enjoy working with him. He is my sponsor. I declare it today. He shows respect. His humility is unparalleled. I've never seen someone who has disrupted the whole market globally and locally and remains humble as he is. Last year, he says, Pelisa, this business of ours, we invest for a world of change, and we want to make it a better place, better people, better, everything has to be better. How do we make sure that the staff in this building that is not employed by 91, but they are serving us every day? We walk in, the security guard is there, go to the canteen, someone is making you coffee, you sit in your desk is clean. How do we give them hope, and how do we give them the opportunity to do something else? Because you know, someone who's a security guard, that's a job that they can get. But how do we better them? How do we make them better? How do we make sure that what we shout every day, that we invest for the world of change, it starts here? what can we do? I said, why don't we take them back to school? And then he said, okay, do it. So we interview them, we'll see them. Fast forward, we've got 22 students through the College of Cape Town. Most of them are finishing their matric. This year is the first piloting group. Some of them are doing business courses, and one exceptional guy who makes our coffee every day is going to do IT. So it starts there. So when we were celebrating I have to say this, when we were celebrating our 30 years, this guy says to me, you are going to welcome the president. Like, okay. You've never seen me present anything anywhere. So how do you get to this decision? And he says, I know I'm taking a risk. I'm willing to take the risk. I've calculated the risk. If it works, it works. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. Fast forward, now we are known. I don't want to waste any more time. I think I've said what I wanted to say, but I want to personally, in front of ABSIP and in front of the young investment professionals and other investment professionals, I want to thank you personally for the contribution you've made in my life in the past 9 years. Thank you.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. So how much did you pay her for that, Hendrik?
You don't know what we pay her. We've got to negotiate soon.
Sure, either you paid her or she's clearly the boss at 91.
She and Natalie and these people. Where's Fadwa?
So you're fronting, in other words.
Yeah, I'm just exactly.
No, thank you so much, Pelisa, for that beautiful introduction. Very heartwarming, very inspiring. I'm still in the youth
I wish
league.
my wife could have heard this.
It's recorded. So for somebody like me who's still in the youth league, I have got a lot that I aspire to from hearing that. And I think it gives us a really good window into the man that you are, Hendrik, and really well done for everything that you've achieved. He's already been introduced, so I don't have to introduce him. But before I start the conversation, I just wanted to share with colleagues why we thought it was important as ABSIP to have this series, these conversations. What we have found is that we've got a wide range of members within our membership base. We've got young people that are entering the work environment, this big behemoth that they don't understand how to navigate. We have people like yourself who've been around for a while, very well established, and whilst you've achieved a lot, the world as you knew it when you started when you were 29 is very different today. And you're probably trying to figure out a lot of things. And we find that there's a huge gap between the guys who are getting in, trying to figure things out, but also between yourselves who could potentially, if you were to come closer, get innovative ideas around how you could navigate some of the challenges that you face. So we thought it would be good to just bring you together. Firstly, bring a face to the name 91, because we all know 91, and we probably know the name of Hendrik du Toit, but not a lot of people know your face, Hendrik. I don't know whether you're aware of that. I think I only met you myself a few weeks ago. So we thought we should just bring some element of humanity to this big London-listed asset management firm, a large asset manager on the African continent as well. So welcome.
Thank you, Paula.
And this is our inaugural session. So you are setting the tone.
Wow.
No pressure. I thought I should put it out
there.
May
I just say something about your idea, Paula? Firstly,
yes.
You got a very good president, guys. I would keep a president for life. It's a good African way. But Paulo came down to see me, and what was really interesting is it struck me that I was privileged in the 80s, late 80s, as a kid when I came from university and I started working in the industry. There were a lot of older guys, mostly guys, but there were also women, who spent time with particularly corporate CEOs. As a young analyst, you go and learn about the business. And the ones who ran the good companies, they always made time.
Yeah.
The ones where the bad companies were too busy. and they invested back for not wanting anything back, just because they were teaching people or sharing ideas and learning. Because you learn from young. We all know that
Yeah.
with kids. They teach us a lot. It's God's way to teach you about the things you don't want to learn about anymore. That's kids. But so for me, there's a privilege to talk and engage with ABSIP, a very important institution in South Africa. But I think this dialogue should be front and center, because we'll come to it later. But the difference between the 1980s and now is we confronted our problems. And if you don't mind, later I'll talk a little bit.
Sure.
We need to collectively confront our challenges and problems. And the only way we can do that is intergenerational conversation or mutual learning. So you started that lunch absolutely spot on, and I got really excited.
I'm glad you did. And I think it was interesting to hear your journey, because as Pelisa was talking about your own journey, I was thinking, geez, how can we almost cut and paste that into today, into the current problem we're trying to solve, which is that of financial inclusion, diversity, representativity. How do we maybe taking a few steps back, the financial services sector says that we are somewhat transformed as a sector. BASA issued a BE report about 18 months ago, saying that most of the banks were doing exceptionally well. I think we're probably level 1, 2, 3 at worst. And yet, your typical South African still doesn't feel this transformation that we brag about and talk about. And I think as ABSIP, we've come to the conclusion that we need to do something fundamentally different. And as I was listening to your story, I was like, maybe those are the types of risks similar to what you did that we need to be taking, the boldness. Because it sounds like you're quite bold as a young person. You didn't accept the status quo.
I still fancy myself as bold.
Well, you're bold, hopefully.
Not bold, bold.
You know, and I was thinking to myself, so how do we take from that and apply it to today? And because it is that boldness that actually saw the shift and the change and the transformation that we are now talking about, you know, which was brought about by 91. How do we do that under the auspices of racial transformation and gender inclusion?
I've got, give me a little space at the end about ABSIP, because I think you guys are a really important institution. And I just went through the lists of presidents, and I know most of them, like Mutli Mokhasi in the beginning, a whole lot of them, known them, grown up in business. But in those days, we talked a lot. We engaged a lot in the sort of immediate post-94 period. And I think we need to start that again. And I'm very privileged to have many ex-colleagues, clients, people whose doors were never closed. The moment you close doors, the moment you, and I wouldn't use the word stereotype, but stereotype is the right word, people, then you lose the richness and the diversity that particularly the South African business landscape has to give. Let me tell you, we have really interesting business people here operating in incredibly difficult and challenging conditions. Those are the people who should be teaching the young guys and the young girls how to build businesses, what to do, and we should aspire. So I want to start off by saying we should probably, now take this with where it comes from, we should continue the transformation journey, because you're consistently transforming in the world, whatever you do. But South Africa, we need to get a stake. Everyone needs to get a stake. We should shift to, I would think, from transformation to inclusiveness. And you can only be inclusive if you have something to include people into. And at the moment, we are screwing up that economy. We are busy destroying opportunities. And even if you want to be inclusive, so we need to confront the reality we face and say, how are we going to change this reality for the betterment of all? and most importantly, the most vulnerable. Because what shocks me in this country is that it's now been long enough since we've had an ANC government. Whether you have a white government, whether you have a black government, no one cares about the very poor. Okay? And if we don't address those challenges, we are not going to get anywhere. So I think that conversation, and the only way we can address that conversation is by creating a tax base of successful businesses, winning businesses, run by black and white and Indian and colored and whoever you want to think about, but successful businesses that employ people. We must move on from this thing of enrichment. We must move into the creation of employment, the creation of competitive businesses worldwide. Because if we don't compete properly, someone else will import the product anyway, even if there's a tax. So I think competitiveness, and you are so important, inspiring young people in this country to be the best in the world at what they do.
Yeah.
Because we live in a world where if you're not the best in the world at what you do, someone's going to come and take you out. And I think in South Africa, we've had sort of a quarter of a century of being inward looking. And allow me to do something. I specifically didn't try and prepare remarks or anything, but this morning on the aeroplane, I read a speech. I reread it. I downloaded it last night. It was the speech where Nelson Mandela was still in jail, and his daughter Zinzi, late Zinzi, it was 1985, and I was a student, so I can remember it. And Zinzi read it at Jabulani Stadium, where she basically, he rejected P.W. Botha's offer. P.W. Botha said, you must renounce violence. He said, no, you must renounce violence. But what he said there is very applicable to us today, if I can paraphrase his words. Because I think collectively in South Africa, we are just not dealing with it. So he basically said, Zinzi went out and said, look, my father heard all of this, but, he's just not going to accept this. And then he said, he had to renounce the ANC as well. He said, I'm a member of the African National Congress. I've always been a member. And then he goes on and he says, I'm surprised at the conditions that the government wants to impose on me. Because they said he should renounce violence. I'm not a violent man. And then he goes on about South Africa and he said, I cherish my own freedom dearly, but I care even more about your freedom. And then too many died. And then he talks about political freedoms. And he talks about the fact that he wants space to live. Now there's a freedom we want today that that is being taken away from us. The assassination of AKA Natal, the freedom to live in peace. So the 80s we fought for democracy. Now we have to fight for the freedom to live and prosper in peace as a society and have an orderly, non-corrupt society. And too few of us are standing up together, calling it out and saying enough.
Yeah.
And that rejection of we need to change our mode.
Yeah.
It's not just in the old system that we have to transform. We have to protect the system and create a new system. And I think that's the bit that worries me. We are not doing it vociferously enough.
Yeah. It's interesting, the point you make about changing the system completely, because I think we've held on to an old system and tried to make a few changes on the edges. Yeah. But I think what you're saying is important around, you mentioned a number of important points, by the way. The first one being around the conversation. We are very good at conversation as South Africans. But I think what you're saying is, are we having the right conversations, right? And it's important because very recently I was actually making an example of when the Financial Services Charter was first published in 2003. We had clear political leadership.
Yes.
So all government departments were involved, at least on the economic cluster. The president was very vocal about the need for transformation. But in the financial services sector, we had the leaders of this sector leading that conversation. I remember specifically Yako Mare. I'm sure there were a lot of other people around him. And that clarity of leadership and that led the right conversation to be had, led us to a point where we were able to produce what I would call a social impact in the financial services sector. And that's how we started implementing BBBE in an intentional manner. And what you are saying is that conversation needs to be had again. Now, the question that I ask you, and maybe putting you on the spot, is to say, now that we are here, you are decrying the state of corruption and all the negative things. Now that we are here, what should we be doing as business leaders? What can you be doing as 91 being, the size and type of business that you are, to get us back to that conversation and lead that conversation? Because it is clearly it's a conversation that needs to be had.
The one important point or very good point about the current regime, particularly the Ramaphosa presidency, is that it doesn't victimize people who express an opinion. So even though I was a big fan of the Mbeki presidency, towards the end of Mr. Mbeki's era, he got very upset when people disagreed with him. So I think that's the one advantage. We have open, free space to express. We don't have to do what some people do in overalls in Parliament, but we have space to express ourselves. And therefore, we have to have the courage to express ourselves as citizens, not as corporate leaders. Because your job in the company is to run the company for shareholders and other stakeholders and deliver value for them, in our case, clients. And you shouldn't be interfering in the world of the politics, but you should be, as a citizen, use your resources, use what you have to support national solutions. And I would say, corporate South Africa, firstly, we should reorganize. We can't have so many corporate South African representative organizations. I mean, it's like a whole lot of them. There should be one for business. And one or two big labor federations. We shouldn't go to NEDLAC, we should just talk straight. NEDLAC is one place there where they keep us talking.
So we should do our own CODESA. Will you and I arrange a CODESA then?
Happy. We should.
Good. We are arranging CODESA.
No, but we should have the comfort.
Yeah.
And I think what you've done with this kind of forum and what you do by having conversations, and that means people from all persuasions, even those I don't agree with and you don't agree with, should be sitting talking, because that was the secret sauce in the 1980s, because the entire society, and that's maybe the young ones, they're also young here in the room. Langa, you guys are too young. But in the 1980s, 95% of South Africans knew that there had to be, Zamani will remember, he's old enough, that there had to be change.
Yeah.
Even the soldiers of the apartheid government knew there had to be change.
Yeah.
And therefore, the leaders had to listen. And, that we need to get that spirit again. And I learned a great deal of that by Sibo, your uncle, the late Enos Mabuza, who is, by the way, the first non-executive on our board. And that was long before it was fashionable to put black guys on the board. But he was the wisest person I knew. And he kept on saying, don't worry, the people will dictate to the leaders. And I think we're getting into a phase now where the people have to dictate.
Yeah.
And what we do with resources, we should create the space for that, whether it's virtual space, whether it's this kind of space. So again, well done to you for doing this. And we should talk about the real solutions that are being created, which also across South Africa. Villages, towns in the Free State starting to solve their problems themselves, not waiting for government.
But let's bring it back now to 91. You made another important point earlier around the need for us to be intentional about creating businesses that are going to create the right type of a tax base that will also lead to the employment of people. One of the things we did in the Financial Services Charter a few years ago was to introduce the idea of a Black Business Growth Fund. And the intention behind that Black Business Growth Fund was to actually redirect capital, instead of us continuing to do BE transactions in the financial services sector, to rather redirect that capital towards backing Black-owned and Black-founded firms within financial services. Apart from one bank that I'm aware of, I'm not aware of any other financial services institution that has taken up the challenge to implement the Black Business Growth Fund. And the question that then arises is, is the financial services sector serious about helping to create black-owned businesses or support those
No, I
black-owned
think the
businesses?
financial sector created a major role in the black ownership or the transition of ownership. Was that necessarily correct? In other words, you created more billionaires than millionaires. I'm not sure that was necessarily correct. I want to go broad-based. So I want us to create a South Africa full of opportunities where whether you're black, white, whatever you are, you can access those opportunities on merit, and capital is freely available for risk-taking, i.e. for entrepreneurial ventures. Because the thing that worries me, now again, most people here are too young to remember, not that I disrespect your knowledge, but you weren't around in the 80s. There was an explosion when people smelt that the Groot Crocodile was going to go on the way out and the transition was come in entrepreneurial energy. Investec was listed in 87 in the hope that there would be a better place. Just after, the Rubicon in 1986 was probably the worst year in South Africa in terms of political chaos and unhappiness and violence on the streets and that. Bidvest, Brian Joffe started Bidvest, came back from America.
But what funded that?
They believed in the future.
But what funded that, though? Is there capital?
The JSE hasn't funded anyone for a long time. There's no listings. So there's a lot of money. I mean, if you think of the pots of money sitting here and the pots of, we weren't that smart at letting our capital pot, most of it go out now with the changes in Reg 28 when we actually needed it here, but that's another story for another day. I think South Africa has enough capital. Is government and society providing the certainty for these long investments? You go and talk. I was just on the weekend in Ceres in the Western Cape, riding my mountain bike in up there at an event, and there are mega farmers there who have done amazing. Of ABSIP, you should invite the guy who started PALS, the agricultural private sector transition project where young farmers, emerging markets are brought in by the big farmers, and government gives water rights, and as a consequence, they can be commercially viable. But talking to some of these big guys, they say, well, after what we experience in the ports, what we experience, all the dams are empty. So I said, why are the dams empty? I said, normally we pump them full. We haven't got the electricity to pump them full. So now we can't get our product out. We lost. We don't know whether we're going to invest next year. So we need to get a culture of investment, a culture of confidence, and that needs black leadership as well, not just white minority people. The majority needs to be in there, and that's why transformation matters. So I think we've got to look at either a black, not necessarily a black fund. We've got to say, how do we capture the entrepreneurs of the future? The Sibo Mabuzas who sit here, he built a fantastic business. Your old organization, they backed you. They knew. There's capital.
But can I ask, what in that context, what would 91 do to, if, for instance, a black professional, somebody who you know very well and trust, were to come to you and say, look, well, I'm trying to set up this business. The importance of this question is because a lot of black professionals will tell you that they go out, they try to start businesses. There's no funding. When you go to the banks and you talk to them about, okay, I'm looking for funding, I know that the Financial Services Charter says that there's this Black Business Growth Fund. Nobody knows what you're talking about. They will take you from pillar to post and you'll never ever get the support. So there is no lack of pipeline when it comes to black entrepreneurship in South Africa. What we have a lack of is the willingness to take the risk and back the black entrepreneurs. And the question that we keep asking as black entrepreneurs is, what is the financial services sector serious about supporting black entrepreneurship? Clearly, it looks like it's not. So what are we doing, or how are you thinking about
we should
about supporting that?
We've got a whole lot of development institutions in this country. IDC, used to have Small Business Corporation, that's kind of gone. But we need to take our land bank for farmers, we need to take our development institutions, deal with the highest risk tranche, and then have a venture industry, which actually we do have, but it's very small and in the shadows. When it comes to people like us who work with pensioners' savings, We are not there to take, banks do it sometimes because they grow clients. So banks take clients from very small stage, take them up and make profit all the way. When you talk about the asset management sector and the pension sector, we invest in fairly mature assets that are reasonably predictable on behalf of people who depend on a pension. So we cannot, what we do is we create, at 91, our mission is to create as many skilled financial professionals as possible who could go out, build their own private equity business, build their own hedge funds, and sometimes have the appetite for risk to drive businesses. But we, a bit like a whale versus, we're very big, but we cannot go outside our lane because we will end up costing the pensioners too much. What we must do is circulate that pensioner capital. So one of our plans now is financing infrastructure. If there's good infrastructure, we can provide the credit. We know how to do that at scale. Remember, we work at scale. So when you deal with an entrepreneur, you're not at scale. It's a slightly different business.
Yes.
But what we should do is bring cohorts and cohorts of skilled young people through. We've got a 91 scholarship program now. We've got 91 kids at university. We're going to put more and more through. Those kids must come through and then go into the sector, into the world, build businesses. But if we change our core business and we try and save the country, we'll go bankrupt with the country. I mean, I know it's needed, but it's just not in our space.
So what you're saying is, as an asset management firm, and please correct me if I'm not hearing you properly, your areas where you feel you are able to contribute and are contributing are in the building of the pipeline of black professionals, hopefully women as well.
Majority women firm.
Okay, good. Into the space, you do the training, and then you release them into the industry.
So, some we try to keep. Most we try to keep, but if they go, they must do well there.
But what is important though, and perhaps that's the biggest area of impact that you have, and I'd like us to talk about that, is where you then support infrastructure investment.
But Paulo, sorry, Paulo. Our impact, and us, I see many of our industry, the securities professionals, our role is to price capital appropriately. If South Africa can price capital professionally, capital will not be misallocated. Because typically, governments tend to misallocate capital because they have administrative pricing procedures, not market pricing procedures. And that capital pricing requires good analysis, thoughtful risk mitigation, long-term thinking. And we are so lucky. We are one of the few emerging markets, probably number 2 after China, I think, probably equal. We can price capital really well. Most other emerging markets, capital is priced abroad, and it's often mispriced through political intervention. That's our social role. If we cannot do that much more. Now, I think every investment, there's a misconception that if you build a bridge, you're doing something good for society. And if you buy the share of a company and maintain the capitalization of that company, which can then raise new capital through the equity markets, you are not doing something good. Maybe you can't point to it, but having, you know how proud I am when I see South Africa's top companies and I see how well they do. That's what we support.
Yeah. So what you're saying is it's critically important to build the skills base in order for us to also be able to compete.
We push the companies we invest in and say, what are you doing about the skills base? Now, it can't bring us a scorecard. Show us that you have transformed leadership teams. Show us what you do in terms of bringing in talent, because we need to use all talents in South Africa. And we also need to think about, I believe corporates have a social role in the communities they serve. So you ask, and that's ESG practical. It's not ESG theoretical.
And what about then where you invest the money that you're talking about, the infrastructure investments that you make? The point I'm really trying to get to ultimately is your typical, say, black South African in a rural area, in a township. How do they know that by 91 existing, my life is improving? How do you impact?
I wish.
How do your investments impact?
I would. If that were true, that statement, I would be in heaven. The sad thing is, the citizen living in deep rural South Africa has been so excluded that he won't know who 91 or Alawani is. Or he would have been
But
paid
let's-
out by Eskom
but let's
Pension
assume
Fund
they do
and he would be
know.
unemployed. No, because we have not included. I mean, I think we need to get to a point where those towns and areas are more successful, that they can be integrated into the financial economy and not going back into the subsistence economy or the smuggling economy. So I think there's a battle before. And maybe if we make Joburg work better, it creates more jobs, it creates more cash going back, and ultimately changes. So what we can do is help make Joburg work better, and Cape Town. We're actually not in a position to make rural KZN work better, but it will work better with the cash going back. And so we need to create a dynamic, modern business environment, and that's our role, and guard against corruption. Our industry has been one of the few where we've been free. When I talk to my peers in South Africa, the construction industry, the engineers, they tell me about the corruption, they tell me about the gangsters coming, extorting.
Yeah.
Okay, we are still, thanks to people in this room and many others, we are operating properly. But we are one step away from that. And if we can, if there's one plea from me today, can we just please defend that line with all our lives and our business? Because once it goes wrong way, why do you think the railways don't work? Yes, they're incompetent. But do you think the taxi drivers aren't involved? Of course they are. Do you think anyone's doing anything? No.
But let's bring it back again. So the money that 91 invests, listers and stuff, is pensioners' money.
No.
These pensioners come from these rural areas and these townships that I'm talking about. How does the pensioner feel that my money being invested in whichever way actually improves my economic conditions or the conditions of the people that come from where I come
Firstly,
from?
we have to pay a return, generate a return, which allows the pension to be paid. Because most pensions in South Africa not defined benefit, but they defined contribution, which means the money that the pensioner put in is just being invested professionally, but is no guarantee. So firstly, that those pensioners get a real return. And there are people like Lungani and others here in the room who make sure we deliver that. Okay, otherwise they fire us. So delivering that is important. Secondly, is it done in a socially sensible way that companies that behave, and I wish we had a provincial bond market, or that's the one thing we want to get going. Let cities compete for capital. And you'll see the badly run cities will pay a lot for their capital, and the well-run cities will pay less, and there'll be an incentive. Unfortunately, we don't have that. But we make sure that the companies we invest in at least behave as decent and constructive corporate citizens. But that's how far we can go. And of course, we then, out of our profits, as a company, and the people of 91 own almost a third of the company, so it's out of our own pockets as well. We invest a significant amount of money back into societies, whether it's the scholarship program, whether it's the training schemes, whether it is simply supporting needs through CSI or backing schools. But that's a drop in the ocean. The real thing is to get the system to work right. And in South Africa, we haven't destroyed that system yet. We need to protect it. And that's why I want to change your name. I don't want you to be ABSIP anymore. You should be the Association of Securities and Investment Professionals. And
once we've transformed, we
should transform
once there's
the
diversity
industry.
and transformation
Exactly.
and inclusivity,
and
not
I want
now.
to join, but I can't at the moment.
No, you're allowed.
But I want to join because
don't worry.
you guys are the future.
We will black paint you. Very easy to solve this problem. But let's talk about, we've had a fairly wide-ranging conversation, and it's really useful to just hear how you see things, how you view things. But bringing it back home now to 91 to say, what has that journey been like for you as 91? How do you feel that at 91 you've done really, really well when it comes to when it comes to transformation, inclusion, diversity? And where, let's be honest, there's not a single financial services institution in South Africa that has done it perfectly. So where are the areas that you believe you need to improve as 91, and what is the plan going forward?
I think there's always room for improvement. Start off here. So one must approach this with humility. It's a big challenge. It's very easy when we started, the only black person was the tea girl, By the way, she outlasted us all. Amina Freeman, she's retired now. She's fantastic. But we got the message. We smelt the coffee. Why? Because your client base was changing. Your market was changing. The society around it. So everywhere in the world where we operate, we reflect the society which we serve. So when we're in Asia or in Greater China, it's Chinese people facing the clients. When we're in the UK, we have a whole lot of Brits. When in America, a whole lot of Americans. And that's just of all shapes and sizes and colors and whatever. So the power of diversity is something we learned fairly early, although initially we had no idea. And thanks to leaders like Mutli Mokhasi and others, Enos Mabuza, others who always pushed us and said, what are you doing? You should be thinking about the future. Thanks to that, we understood the value. So today, to me, it's about getting the best kids in South Africa into the business to develop and grow into the professionals that South Africa needs, or in every market we operate. And I think it's about creating the space for being yourself. I went to a Afrikaans government school, where we had not many privileges, but there was a neat school in Cape Town. But it taught me one thing. Its motto was be yourself. You don't have to pretend to be something you're not. If everyone in the business can be themselves, they will be their best selves, and then they will deliver. And that goes whether it's religious, sexual orientation, race, gender, the whole lot.
I'd like to pack on this because it is such a powerful thing you're saying. It touches on inclusion. You're not using the term, but that's actually what it is. And what I
you
also
can't transform without inclusion.
Yes. Well, yeah, sustainably, yeah, you can't. And I think what I also really appreciate, because a lot of the time in the heat of the debate around the need for transformation and inclusion, we often think that there's no business case. And what you've just said says to everybody who's listening that it's dumb not to be inclusive, because you're not going to be able to tap into markets that are potential customers for you into the future. So inclusion, diversity, transformation is a business imperative, and it's a global imperative. It's not a South African thing.
No.
And I like what you are saying your school's motto was, because it's that thing. When I spoke with you, I spoke to you about the fabric of transformation, where it's not just a charter that we've put somewhere, in the office and everybody can read it out. But as I walk in, as Polo, wearing my Nigerian print, I feel that this space enables, embraces, and allows me to express myself. Today, I could be wearing this. Tomorrow, I could be wearing, my European suit. The other day, I could be wearing my Zulu outfit. And the space embraces and allows me to be the people that I present myself as every day as I appear. And I think it is so important, and I wish we could find a way of codifying it, for lack of a better term, in business.
Paulo, may I just ask here, or I appeal to all, you're a very important institution again, because we've got to get what, in America, it's gone completely wrong. Now, I can tell the experience of our people. We employ around 50 people there. They've all, after Black Lives Matter, started praying at the diversity and inclusion altar. Very few mean it. Okay, they say it. They tick the box. It's the lawsuit that comes after it. But I know the comfort I have when I walk a street in South Africa, someone looks at me, they don't look at me as if I'm white, they look at me as if I'm a person. And when I look at a black person, it's a person, okay? And we can talk and we can be ourselves while being in a diverse environment. I think in the Western world, things are going completely pear-shaped. in this sort of woke revolution that we're seeing. Because it's becoming shaming and naming and Twitter and calling people names instead of saying, instead of going back to the Ubuntu concept, is I'm a person through the other person. If you understand that, if you're a person through the other person, it doesn't matter who the other person is. You and that person will get along and make a better life. So I think we in South Africa actually, we can shift the debate again and go towards the solutions rather than the problems. Because in the Western world today, it is so scary that people don't engage. So they all sit and say, oh, they believe in diversity and they think different things. Okay? What I want in our business, and hopefully in 91, and Pelisa mentioned the culture, is we are trying to encourage an open culture where people can express and actually can disagree, but respectfully. So the word respect we've lost out of our vocabulary. Kids at school don't get disciplined properly anymore. They, the respect that we had in traditional societies, we need to rebring. Then our diversity will be even better and richer.
Yeah.
And I think that's the next phase that we should. Because we've come a long way. You remember when you started out, how few people, black people, there were in business, how few successes there were.
Women in particular, Hendrik, the issue of women doesn't get the attention that it needs. When I started, we were the only women fund manager in the country. Not black or white, just women. So we have come a long way, but there's a lot of work that needs to be done. But I really like, for me, what I'm taking away, and it confirms what we've started saying as ABSIP, is that the issue of culture is critical to achieving sustainable transformation. If the leadership and culture is held typically by the most senior people in the organization, and it sounds to me like you are the culture carrier, and you are then able to share and make sure that this thing is spread across the whole organization. And that's why Pelisa is able to stand on stage and speak so well of you and her experience of you. And I wish, and therefore, going back to the suggestion you're making about conversations, I think that we need to have those conversations, not just CEOs to upcoming people, but actually CEOs to CEOs. CEOs need to start sharing their stories
You
around.
should facilitate.
Yeah, I will do that. Don't worry. I'll put you all in.
But I just,
but you're going to pay me $1 million each this time.
before I pay the $1 million, can I just, can I just say that I think the in this conversation for you to, and I'm sorry, I'm preaching to ABSIP now because you're an important institution. I think to get most out of this inclusivity and transformation agenda, we need to think of joint goals, i.e. the success of our society, the success of our sector. And so if we start talking about and celebrating the successes in our sector and encouraging higher standards. I want to go to the Springbok rugby team where they really have a culture of inclusivity, but they win the World Cup at the same time. And that sustains the further transformation. So we've got to start putting score on the board. And my worry about South Africa in the last 10 years, it was obviously destroyed by the Zuma administration or severely damaged, is we haven't put score on the board. So we need to talk about that at the same time. Otherwise, it's a hollow debate.
Yeah. We need to do that, but not drink our own Kool-Aid, though, because I think when we have reports that say everybody's a level 1 BE, that's when we're starting to drink our Kool-Aid. And I think that's what we need to guard against. And the one conversation that we are starting to have within ABSIP as well is, this whole business of scorecards clearly it has got us focused on the wrong thing. I like that you started saying it, but I think you stopped, but I know what you're going to say. You were going to say that we need to agree on what the end game looks like. Right? That's what you're going to say. Because I think that's another thing that as a sector, as a society, as an economy, we are not aligned on what that end game should be like. And I think part of this conversation, this CODESA that you and I are going to host, we're going to have to say, what does that look like?
Paulo, you must help us articulate an economic vision for this country. Without that, go and read the story of Singapore. These guys were literally workers carrying things off the ships for the Brits. and when they came independent. And Lee Kuan Yew took, his People's Action Party took over. They all thought he was going to be communist. He said, I was only a communist because I need to solve a problem, but I'm going to solve it differently. And they created a country with a per capita income more than twice the UK in my lifetime. But they had a very, very clear economic vision. Deng Xiaoping, when he went on his southern tour in 1992, he spoke about the economic vision of China. So we haven't got that. When last have you heard a leader talk about that? Besides that sonar with nice words. Okay? Actually,
So we should have that. So we should then
this is how
develop
we're
this
going to
thing.
compete. How are we going to make all our businesses, and how are we going to be the most dynamic financial market? We Africa's capital market. This is nonsense that Nigeria is bigger than us. That's just an accountant's figment of an accountant's mind. There are more people there.
There are more people.
We've got a better, stronger economy, but we are not selling it to the world. We are not, and that starts with the small things. If I go to a good business and I buy shares, and I just look at this, when I used to analyze equities, and I don't just look at what the CEO tells me or the investor relations. I walk through the factory, I look if it's tidy, if it's, do the workers smile? All those things, that's important financial data.
Yeah.
Now, in this country, we stopped caring. Plastic is overcoming us. No one's picking up a bag. They're all unemployed, but they can't pick up a bag. Why don't we organize the people? Why don't we clean our facilities? And you'll suddenly see a pride come back. But you'd only do that if there's a vision and if there's some hope. And at the moment, that hope has been quashed by unemployment. So to me, that's the number one agenda we have to address. Because we won't catch the criminals if all the people are unemployed.
Yeah, true. Very true. And Hendrik, I keep trying to squeeze in the women issue, and we move on. I want us to talk about.
I've got a daughter.
I'm glad you have a daughter. Then at least you'll also be doing this for her sake. But what is 91 when it comes to? I don't have a sense, for instance, of your diversity when it comes to gender.
We're majority women.
Majority women, yeah. But how?
So actually, the men are oppressed at 91.
Are they? Well, I sort of saw signs of it now. But where are they, though? So you're majority women, but are women in the critical technical areas,
Yes.
or do we have enough representation in those areas?
Yes, come spend time there and look at them. I mean, the one area where in our industry it's traditionally fallen behind, it's much worse actually in London than in Johannesburg or Cape Town, is women portfolio managers. They don't know what a good role, but our longest serving portfolio manager with the longest single track record is a woman who was employee number 4. Okay, so we have some excellent, and I, by the way, think the investment game is an excellent place for women because they have an sixth sense or an intuition, whatever you want to call it. They can smell bullshit far better than a man. Okay, so this should be a business where women do much better. But I mean, you see some of the leading women sitting here today. They can speak. I can't speak for them. But all I know, it's always made sense to have gender diversity.
So we have recorded that, and we're going to be splashing it all over social media.
Yes. because I report to one at home.
No, the importance, though, is that we don't hear enough of that. Just like we don't hear enough of the importance of diversity, racial diversity, we also don't hear the importance of the role that women play and some of the unique qualities that they bring into spaces that have traditionally been male. And that's why, I think that's part of the reason why you don't find a lot of women naturally.
Where I would not take issue with you, I think we're going to a world where we don't let males be males. I think we must also let people be comfortable in their own skin. If you are, no matter what color male you are, you must also not feel so constrained and oppressed that you can't express yourself. So I come up for the old white males, not the smoking ones. But also just very comfortable in who you are. Then the other will be comfortable to engage. I think we must see diversity in its broader context. It's also social. It's not just whether you can have 5 white males here, If they come from very different social backgrounds, they will collectively probably make a more sensible decision than the ones
on
from
their
one
own. Yeah.
one layer private school or whatever.
Yeah.
But you don't want the guy from the private school who happens to be white, who happens to be, say, English speaking, whatever, to be so apologetic about who he is that he doesn't contribute his best.
Yeah.
So I think diversity needs a certain balance and a certain honesty about it. My sense is in South Africa, we have reached that point where, at least on the racial debate, we talk very comfortably and straight. And may we not get people who exploit that for political purposes. Sometimes you see it on the fringes.
Yeah.
But I think in the center, actually that's where the center is holding.
Yeah. Hendrik, we have to end it here. I think Langa is
I
about
can talk to you for a whole night.
Yeah, but the thing is that the conversation is not over.
No, this is the beginning.
Yes, it's not over, and I think I'm quite liking the idea of creating spaces where we can converse very, very frankly, very honestly, and really have the right conversations.
Can I just tell you quickly before the time over? In the 80s, there were enormous amount of conversations facilitated largely by the private sector of people across different political and racial and other affiliations who, away from the noise of the internet and the digital recording, could have conversations that changed their lives, including my own. And I think that's something we need to start here, in a way that where people can I hate the word safe space, but where people can learn honestly,
Why do
not
you hate
just
space?
pretend to know.
Why do you hate space?
Safe space because it's woke.
Okay. Okay, we'll create a platform then for people to come. Yeah. No, and I think it is time. You're quite correct that we are at a point in our history where we need to go back there. I was reading this book by, I think it's called ANC Billionaires, and they were also talking about the role that the then CEO of Anglo American played by galvanizing a few other CEOs to have these conversations, which then led to
Anglo American played an enormous role in the 80s. Actually,
Yeah.
us as students, we were funded to go to the traditional black universities, meet the guys from both COSAS and Inkatha aligned, for example, in Natal and ANC aligned. We met and engaged, and that was paid for by fairly visionary business people. I think we have this is the time where you've got to sort of pick up that fight again and say, we cannot let society collapse around us and just do our profits. We have to think about the broader things.
Hendrik, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you,
I
Paula.
hope you enjoyed this chat as much as I did. This was the warm-up to a very, a much more robust conversation than this. Thank you so much.
Thank
for
you
your time.
very much, Paula.
I think we are open for Q&A. We'll take questions from the floor. I know that there are some people streaming. I don't know whether they are able to. They're not able to send questions. Okay, that's fine.
Feel free to disagree as well.
Yeah.
Thanks, Hendrik, for your insights in terms of this session. My name is Pumla. I work for the FSTC. You've touched on a number of points which I'm not going to delve into. But what struck me most is the point that you put across on confronting reality. And further on, you challenged Bulu to say she has to consider I don't know whether it's an economic summit or what, but what I would want to challenge you on and persuade you on, as you say that we need as a sector to put specific goals in place in order to achieve what we envisage to achieve. Can I put a challenge to you so that we can have a debate within the sector itself on what the end goal means? Like, for instance, some of the things that you allude to say, from a qualitative perspective, this is the kind of work that you are doing, but there's no uniformity in terms of that. And I think for me, as a build-up to that conversation that Pulu has to consider for the country, such things are important. The articulation of the charter that she continuously alluded to, I think for me, it's really quite important. So in the spirit of encouraging that dialogue that helped us to confront the reality of the past, I am challenging you so that we can have further conversations within the FSTC as well as the companies within the sector itself. Thank you.
Thank you, Pumla. I mean, I'm 100% with you. You can't go anywhere if you don't know where you're going. So you can also not make, if transformation just means a never-ending process, then we missed it. Transformation means we get a representative industry that serves society as a whole, but doesn't, and I think that's where I'm going to put a line in the sand, that is not held responsible for all the ills of society. So the financial sector, with the best will in the world, cannot solve an education deficit, cannot solve some infrastructure. It can finance good infrastructure, but it can't solve the fact that things don't get maintained. And I think that's where the financial sector collectively, particularly as we progress on that journey to transformation, should collectively talk about what it expects from other sectors. I mean, I remember in the early days, you talking about Jaco Maria running around Kennedy Bungani. Now he's running a bank that's transformed. But I remember how he was pushing, saying we should get through. And we have to have those robust conversations. But there's a point when we say, collectively, we are comfortably on track, and we're not accusing each other. We now actually demanding from other social role players the support. Because my worry is that South Africa's money economy is too healthy compared to its real economy. Our challenge is to fix the real economy.
Well said.
Is
the mic on? Yeah. Hi, it's good to speak after the FSTC. I'm Gumani Shkovi, a client director at 91. So I know Pulu was pressing Hendrik on South African specific for 91. So I just want to say a few things. So thanks for those questions, Pulu. So I sit on the Transformation Committee of 91. So I just want to give you guys stats to tell you what we're doing at 91. So 67% of our staff is black, 60% are women. And then on the investment team, which is the engine room of our business, about 53% are black investment professionals. So that's staff. And then you spoke about the Black Business Growth Fund. So unfortunately,
what about women on the
60?
On the investment team?
Yeah.
On the investment team, they're about 40%. Yeah.
You see.
So I just meet
and we make up 51% of the population. We need to get that number to us.
Yeah, yeah. So if I include white females, sorry, this is black. If I include white females, we're over 61%.
Okay.
Yeah. So
you're forgiven.
Yeah. So and then to talk about what we're doing. So our objective is to transform the value chain. So we look very deeply into who we procure from. So part of initiative that we do is the enterprise and supply development. So we spend about 60 million rand a year on majority black stock brokers. So we give them grants and interest-free loans for their capital adequacy ratio with the JSE. And I mean, most of them, unfortunately, there aren't many here, or there aren't any, but they will tell you how it has helped them improve their businesses and unlock the growth potential that they have. So now they're dealing with, the bigger clients like the PIC here, so EPPF. So they're able to trade larger trades as a result of the interest-free loans that we've given them. So essentially, I mean, there's more that we're doing, but I just thought let me just highlight a few that will tell you what we're doing to improve the lives of the communities that we operate in. Thank you.
Thanks, Kumani. Just on the black stock brokers, before you had the charter and all of that, when the first ones came on the exchange, and the very first was Emmanuel Lediga, we didn't have any formal allocations then. He was just a damn good stockbroker working for a white Afrikaans stockbroker. And when he set up on his own, his old boss phoned and said, will you please support him? And we said yes, because he did the running. And a lot of the black stockbrokers are doing a fantastic job. So it's not just 91 being so kind. It's actually these people are, coming through, and they make you guys proud.
Last question, right? Oh, is there another one? Okay.
Hi, Nhlakanipho Mthembu from Eskom Pension Fund. Thanks again to Polo and Hendrik for the conversation. I mean, I look forward to joining future conversations, CEO Roundtable. But I just wanted to touch on, a couple of things that you mentioned around South Africa needing businesses to be globally competitive, and which Polo kept going back to around financing. So like I analyze the tech space. In South Africa, Comcom actually did find that black entrepreneurs or historically disadvantaged entrepreneurs find it tougher to actually get financing for their ideas and businesses unless it's mandated to. And even then, those mandates are not enough. So again, for me, this speaks to a continuation of that separation of a black organization that pushes black issues and realities as evidenced in this study. And then also on my other component, also looked at what happened with regards to the guarantee scheme for 200 billion. Only less than 10% of that or something was actually allocated, even though we know that a lot of businesses needed it. So again, for me, it feels like we still need to, have these race-based allocations or interventions, as much as we live in a global world, but there's certain things that we cannot run away from. So in starting a business, you have to have social capital, which black entrepreneurs from the township in this environment don't have. So how do we then progress, towards this, nirvana of, instead of being ABSIP, you take away the black and it's just advancement of securities personnel, when we know that these are the realities faced by black entrepreneurs and black professionals. And then lastly, you've got, again, within tech, the Startup Act is coming up, and one of the major things that I'd seen around the Startup Act, which was negative, was around BEE not applying to tech startups up to 100 million rand. Again, making sure that, perpetuating that disenfranchised black tech professional or investment professional. So all these things come back to just that question around how do we move forward towards this nirvana, but understanding the realities of what black entrepreneurs and professionals face on the ground. Thanks.
I think very, very good point. And until we've eliminated the fact that there's a disparity in the racial mix of successful people relative to the population, we have to deal with it. So I'm with you on that. But I think we have to also be, I want to put a different spin on it. I mean, I sit on the board of Naspers and Process, where we put more than R1 billion into the foundry. Township kids come and program and learn and all that. But it's the educational deficit. The point is, you can't go into a tech business and start it up if you don't understand maths or some form of program. So go look at our school results. We celebrate this education. The politicians come on every year saying wonderful results when 30% is the pass rate and fewer study maths. So and that's not the fault of the few privileged guys who went to good schools where they got it through. It's actually the system. So we need to squeeze that system and say, come on, deliver. Take the talented kids who show aptitude. Let's put them in schools where they can get on. Let's not all average down. And by the way, if we were sitting in the US or the UK today, or France, we would have had exactly the same conversation, not on race, but on people saying they don't have access to finance. Everyone always says they don't have access to finance because finance discriminates, because finance only goes to where it can get a return. It's really simple. It's not development finance. So development finance, i.e. where we create a sliver of capital that should be taking much higher risk for the same return. We haven't organized ourselves well in South Africa, both private sector and public sector. And I think the gentleman here points out, and he makes a very good point on the fact that it doesn't flow to black entrepreneurs. But the example you guys set at EPPF of running a decent institution, operating well, so much better than your namesake who's supposed to supply energy, that inspires more. That creates professionals who come through and set up businesses. And I just think we've got to focus on that more than saying there's no supply of finance, because there's never enough finance.
I need to challenge that, Henry.
Come at me.
I have to challenge that very strongly, because this is a space that I operate in every day of my life.
Yes.
I run a VC fund.
Yes.
Where, of course, Black is
So
hopefully
why
you
aren't
can
you
see.
funding all these guys?
That's the problem. I'm the only one who's funding them. I give a deal flow to the Naspers Foundry. I talk to those guys all the time. The only Black firm they funded actually came from my business. And so we actually do have a problem of the perception that if it's Black, it's not good enough. And yet some of the best Black tech startups in this country that we have funded have gone on and raised funding elsewhere. We do have a racial profiling problem when it comes to that. So the issue of money allocation is not about the scarcity of money. It's about who is sitting on the other side of the table. And by the way, the problem is not even about, even some Black professionals assume that if you're Black, it's not good enough, because the foundry is headed by a Black guy.
Yeah.
And most of his team is Black.
Yeah, he's
but they
supposed to
still,
give you
but they
money.
still back white startups primarily. So there's no shortage of pipeline when it comes to the tech space. There are so many programs, things like Girl Code.
No, but you would admit that there is a shortage in population proportions.
No, of course. But I agree, because historically, of course, white people would have had a better chance.
Yeah.
But in terms of the absolute number of people,
Yeah.
we do have the pipeline in this country, and we are finding that institutions still take a step back when it comes to Black tech startups and women in particular. So there has to be intentionality, and I agree with the gentleman that we need to be very intentional and unapologetic about being very targeted in terms of where we're going to be directing capital, until we get to a point where we can say now the playing field is being leveled. But there is that problem. I talk to them all the time.
I take that. I take that. But I just want us to, we're not going to solve the problem with that intentionality if we don't have a vibrant tech sector or VC sector.
Yeah.
Now, it's a South African boy from, in fact, my old school, who's running the biggest VC in the world, Sequoia Capital.
Oh, yes, yeah.
Okay.
The water guy.
Yes. Now, he, to me, not to talk about Musk. So we've got people out there. We need to create a vibrant tech and sector here, and then we can direct. If we just direct, it's not going to be here. Let's get the vibrant sector first, and I think we are reasonably okay, but we're not great compared to Nigeria or Kenya, and they sell themselves to the rest of the world better. Why? Because more of them are educated internationally. South Africans have turned inwards post-94 and not educated themselves. The whites have sent their kids away rather than seeing international education as part of your education. You come back home. Black people in South Africa, some have had international education, maybe the political elite, but it's not been enough. So what we should have is an internationally networked country accessing global and local capital. So, people like you will be highly saleable in the right markets. And I don't think we've intentionally gone out after it because we haven't set a big enough vision for ourselves as a society.
Yeah.
So maybe we do both. You and I agree.
So we're going to do Codesa, and then we're going to talk about this.
Yeah, you're going to take some
We've got
American
a lot of work
money.
to do. Okay, I think that's okay.
One more.
One last question.
I promise I'll be quick. Good afternoon, everybody. Level from Alex Forbes. Hendrik, thanks for your time. I think, Hendrik, you'd probably agree that one of the pillars of success of your organization has been patient capital. You'd also agree that, in fact, even in those early days when you were trying to build a track record, patient capital was important. I mean, I think if you overlay it with what we've seen, obviously, over the years, that a large portion of the assets under management do typically sit in the kind of top 10 area. Would it be fair to say that you would also agree that part of what maybe also needs to happen is a reallocation of some of that capital to other up-and-coming managers, where you're also patient, where there's clearly a consideration around the fact that when the capital's patient, you can hire the right resources, you can build the right operations and the likes. And so obviously I'm talking from a fund allocator perspective that, to your comment around the efficient capital allocation, that maybe sometimes there has to be intervention to create the right outcomes in terms of intentionality. And so would you agree that there has to be consideration around the reallocation of these assets to create the outcomes that we want?
I would, but you're making a very important point about making the industry base wider and supporting new entrants. I fully support that, but there was no such thing as patient capital in our life. Alex Forbes, let me quickly tell you a story, how we got the Alex Forbes support. Leon Lewis, the late Leon Lewis. Okay, after 2 years in business, we finally get, or 3 years, we finally get a lunch with, this is now your, king of, or Davies equivalent at Alexander Forbes, Leon. And there were taxi riots. I don't know whether you remember. Maybe Lungani will remember, but I don't know. There were taxi riots in downtown Joburg where they were shooting at the police here in the mid-80s. And South Africa was in chaos, in the mid-90s, or early 90s. And I had to go to Lingalonga in Braamfontein for this lunch. Okay, we've been working on it. It took more than a year to arrange every connection in a book to kind of introduce our credentials to Leon. The taxi started shooting the cops there down near the JSE, and Investec was still down in the 55 Fox Street. So I said, look, I'm going. And regardless, I'm not going to miss the lunch. So literally, they were shooting at the cops. I leopard crawled around there, the market area. The shirt was black, ran over Braamfontein Bridge, got to the lunch, and Leon said, why do you look like this? I said, no, I leopard crawl here because they were shooting there, but I was going to miss the lunch. He said, okay, I might give you a chance. But there was support for new ideas, but in the end, if your returns didn't make it, the law of the jungle would have dealt with it. That doesn't mean you can't have an openness to a new entrant, which in those days, Alex Forbes had. And if Alex Forbes didn't include us on the list, they didn't give us any money for free. They didn't have a multi-manager then, but they allowed us to pitch. And I think it's the allowing to pitch. There's some very smart black professionals in our industry. I know them. They're our shareholders. As I go around and report to them, they ask me good questions. They're smart. They can run money. Why aren't they competing? But they should not get, here's a little allocation here, B team, go play there. They should be allowed a chance at the big time and fail and succeed and fail and succeed. Because otherwise you create a soft sector on the side. So that's my difference. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, everybody. I think we're done.
Thank you, Paulo.
Madam.
By the way, Paulo is the first person I've interviewed where the phone is coordinated with the dress. It looks
that's how I
jacket.
That's how I do. Tomorrow now.
It's very good. I feel privileged.
We are done, and I would like to thank ABSIP for this opportunity, giving us the platform, the stage, and for inviting Hendrik to this event. We really appreciate it. Two takes from me is that everything or anything that we do, we have to be intentional. Number two, you have to do you. 91, do you. ABSIP, absolutely, you have to do you. What we've missed though, Pulu, you kept on asking about women in 91. We do have women in 91. They are there, and most of all, other than the numbers, we're making it a space for them to grow and excel. And be themselves. Thank you very much. I think Hendrik wanted to be off by past. So I think we're a few minutes late, but thank you very much for that. Thank you. Thank you.
Ayunati, thank you very much. Here's our portfolio manager.
Oh, lovely.
Thank you.
In life, there is only one constant: change.
Ladies and gentlemen.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome His Excellency, Mr. Cyril Ramaphosa, President of the Republic of South Africa. Yeah, Ramaphosa, yeah! Yeah, Matambela, yeah!
91 is a proudly South African firm with a truly global footprint. True to its founding ethos, 91 continues to invest for a world of change. It is a firm that I'm pleased to say is committed to transformation and gender equality. I congratulate 91 on this important anniversary. May you continue to grow, and may you continue to blaze a trail of success.
We are ready, and the people of 91 are ready to continue to contribute to a better South Africa, because it was Lenin who said, for decades nothing happened, and in weeks, decades happened.
I would also like to thank the team at 91, Sis Pelisa, Megan, who have worked with us to tirelessly put together this event, and the team at Investec, led by Tracy as well, who have also agreed to host us as many times as we need, for free. In fact, when I was speaking to Tracy, she offered to pay us to keep coming here, but I'll be taking up that matter with her after this. I'd like to thank the ABSIP NEC leadership cohort and the team that have worked tirelessly as well to make sure that we have a great event, both here in person and online. And then I'd like to thank you, leaders in the industry, champions, captains, my investors. I wanted to name you no more, but I won't today. Thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedules to come out and support this conversation. We look forward to continue to have your support at the next upcoming ones. And we hope that we will be able to put together, as has been discussed here, a paper that speaks to where we should be going. We acknowledge the presence of the leadership from the FSTC as well. Thank you very much, Madam CEO. And last but not least, I could not close without saying thank you so much for coming, Unati. It's always a pleasure to see you. Ladies and gentlemen, there's lunch that will be served after this. Please enjoy.